Hello, welcome to the Toddcast. The
Toddcast. First episode?
The first episode. Don't you love that name? I just want to dwell there for a moment.
Sounds a lot better than the Botham cast, doesn't it?
The Botham Blast.
Blast. No, the Toddcast. You know? It's good. The
Toddcast. And today we're addressing a very significant, very serious question. Are you struggling with P.P.T? Do you remember at the start of the pandemic, everybody was talking about PPE?
Oh yeah, personal protective equipment.
Was that what that means?
That took me a second. I was like, what?
And there was a shortage of it, but now we have an overabundance of P.P.T. So somebody's out there saying, well, what's P.P.T? Well, P.P.T. is post-pandemic trauma.
That's right.
And I'm not even sure if this question is legit because I'm not even sure if this is post-pandemic yet.
Who knows? I'm confused. 18 months in.
Is this thing ever going to come to an end, do you think?
Yeah, and I hope so. I really hope so.
My name's Roy Todd, and I'm a pastor, and I'm also joined by my good friend Fraser Botham. He's also a pastor, same church, and we're here to encourage you. The Toddcast is a chance every week just for us to chat about life and bring a bit of faith perspective into that as well. It may go somewhere, it may go nowhere.
Who knows?
We have got no grand illusions of this like taking over the world and giving that guy Joe Morgan a run for his money. What's his name?
Joe Rogan.
That's the one. Joe Morgan. You see, I'm so familiar with like the podcast world, you know, that I get his surname wrong. What's his name again? Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan. Yeah.
We have no illusions of becoming the new Joe Rogan of the podcast world. But this is the Toddcast, so we're the first, hopefully.
And we want to come on and just encourage you guys, you know.
And it's quirky, so it'll be. And what does quirky mean? It means terrible jokes every now and then.
All the time.
Dad jokes.
Amen.
And you know
Which
what
I'm
that...
not qualified.
You were qualified to tell dad jokes now. It's going to be gritty, so we're going to get into some real life issues, and we'll talk about this today. That's what we're going to talk about, you know, how to emerge well in this after the weirdest 18 months of our lives. Yeah. How do you come out of this well? And we want to be positive as well. We want this to be really positive because there's a lot of negativity in the world. And
sure is.
Nobody needs that. Although, I mean, I say every now and then, as the older I get, I have a little rant every now and then, to be honest.
You need it, don't you?
I think it's important.
You got to process how you're feeling, though, too.
I think when a man's lived for so many years, it's a man has a right to just have a little rant every now and then about bad drivers and so on.
Especially, people who are in the wrong lanes on the motorways. Nothing gets me angrier in life.
People who hog the middle lane. Let's do a Toddcast on that. Honestly,
I'm a nightmare for. I know you're not supposed to. It's a bit illegal, but I undertake just to show them how wrong that they're being.
You'd make a point.
I make a point.
Exposing sin on the M1.
And I knew the M's that there are. Yeah.
So, post-pandemic trauma. First things first. This is episode 1 of the Toddcast. So let's talk about the past 18 months and let's do a little brief assessment. March of 2020, and that's when this thing, basically then, the lockdown was the big game changer, wasn't it?
Yeah, because it was supposed to be 2 weeks.
Everybody
said it. And it was filled with banana breads.
Yeah.
And the Tiger King. Do you remember Tiger King?
I do.
And then
I never really got into that show though on the Netflix.
I guiltily really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But anyway,
but it was like the weirdest thing ever, wasn't it?
Bizarre.
Like a lockdown. I remember driving into Loughborough shopping one day, and it was like a ghost town. Like shops were literally boarded up.
I mean, me and my wife, we lived in the town centre at that time, and it was the most bizarre thing. That first lockdown day, looking out the window and just seeing empty streets.
It was like this dystopian, era. I thought the rapture had happened and we'd missed it. It was like unbelievable. And then of course I don't know what happened. I don't know what it's like for you, but there's this sort of, you're resolute at first. You think, okay, it is what it is, whatever that means. It is what it is, and you have to get on with it. But I think 18 months later, that's when you begin to process it. That's certainly how it works with me. I tend to have be pretty resolute in a crisis, but then afterwards, that's when it hits me. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's true for a lot of people, isn't it? After something's happened, you start to think, oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
That really affects, and you don't even realize the effects, do you, until afterwards? No. And it's like, oh my goodness.
It's a bit difficult to really understand what this thing's about. You're just trying to get to grips with it during when everything's happening. But here we are, 18 months later. What's different now compared to before? before March 2020.
Wow.
I mean, the world's just different, isn't it?
Everything's different, isn't it?
Everything.
I think everything's different. Industry is changing.
Yeah.
Everything's online now. All those companies that said, "No, working from home is not going to work." All of a sudden, everyone's working from home.
Yeah. People put on a lot of weight.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm talking personally now.
I mean, I think the lockdown went on so long. I gained weight, lost weight, and gained weight again. That's how long it's been. It's been a wild 18 months, Pastor Roy. It's been a wild 18 months. But
you've been fluctuating, have you?
I've been up and down like nobody's business.
But I just think everything's. I mean, the social distancing thing. That was a tough gig, wasn't it? Like not being able to see family. That was traumatic in itself.
I was going to say, especially the first lockdown when it was. I mean, if you remember back when it was ruthless, wasn't it? You couldn't see family. You could go out for one walk a day.
Yeah.
I mean, these are things that
I was longing for a holiday in North Korea because I thought, hey, there'll probably be more freedom over there. Okay, that's quirky. That's a bad joke.
It's quirky. It's quirky.
That's as good as it gets, ladies and gentlemen, as well. By the way, but it's like social distancing,
masks.
and then during the course of the year as well, you had like the George Floyd thing, and you know what really frustrated me about that was that like we weren't together to chat that through.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can have conversations about that stuff on the Zoom and on the YouTube, but it's not the same, is it, as being like face to face and in person and so on.
Yeah, and actually being able to process, I guess, that emotion with people and give people hugs. Do you know what I mean? Really genuinely be there for people.
And I'm a huggy guy. I got to be honest with you. I mean, I'm a very tactile guy. I hug everybody, so I miss that.
Yeah. I miss
because it reassures me, doesn't it? And I find that traumatic. That's probably the most traumatic thing of all, was not getting a hug.
It was just weird. Do you remember
when my wife just walked into the house and she just gave me the elbow? I thought, what the heck is going on here? I said, love, you're taking this thing too far.
Hug your wife. I think that was okay.
Yes, I said, love, the rules do not apply to marriages. Do you understand? The husbands and wives and those who are in relational relations, they're permitted to engage in a hug or two every now and then. We have one quota a day. We can do that. But isn't it, everything's online. I'm noticing like a lot of shops like that used to be really thriving, gone. I went into town the other day. I fancied a burrito.
Oh yeah, Plan burrito.
Plan burrito's gone.
What?
It's gone. Plan burrito is gone. It's like gone.
Wow.
I mean, this is traumatic. This is
actually quite traumatic.
And like, there's so many other places that have gone as well.
Top Man, Top Shop. They're all online now. I mean, the world's changing. The world. It's just catalyzed change, I think, hasn't it? The lockdowns.
And it's not just like one thing that's changed, but it's like lots and lots and lots and lots of little things, and that is like overwhelming in itself. So I think that what happens then when you've got all this massive change going on, and we probably still, in one sense, haven't really had a chance to truly process the extent of how the world has changed. We've just had the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and that changed the world. I think this is bigger. I think this is bigger by far.
Yeah, well, this is world impact, isn't it?
This is world impacting.
More, well, I guess it affected the world, but much more America.
Well, I remember 9/11. It was like 3 months. Okay, so there was obviously a lot of stuff that happened in the years after 9/11, Afghanistan, for example. But I mean, like, life just went on.
Yeah.
After 3 months of, it was in the news for 3 months, and then we kind of got back to some kind of normality again, which is a statement of the resilience, I guess, of society. This is just on and on and on. Even now, like, we're talking about the possibility of more lockdowns and more restrictions, and what if there's a flare-up of the virus in the winter time, and even as double jabbed people, it's not 100% protection, so there's that little thing in your mind, that we're still kind of susceptible to this.
As you say, though, 9/11 changed the world. The way we travel, airplane travel, airport travel, like that, all changed after that.
Sure did.
I think that's COVID. Post-COVID, whatever that looks like, post-pandemic, things are going to shift massively in loads of different arenas of life.
So let's talk about trauma then. I can't even say this.
Post-pandemic trauma.
Nan-Pantan trauma. Sorry, Nan-Pantan's an area near where we live, and everybody laughs at the name. Nan-Pantan.
It's very nice.
Sorry, I feel like I'm digressing, but I feel like we've got to talk about this just for a moment, because that's a traumatic name in itself. Somebody's nan got stuck in a pan and ended up with a tan.
It was a sunny day and they got a tan. The jokes really don't get better.
I want to live there one day.
It's a nice area.
My aspiration in life is just to. I tell you what we'll do. We'll plant a campus. Well, our nan pan tan campus.
Amen. Well, the logo, I can see it already, is a nan holding a pan with the sun raining down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Powerful.
Exactly. What power? Anyway, I feel like we've digressed there. I
bit.
feel like you distracted me there by talking about Nan Pan Tender. Or was it me who brought up Nan Pan Tender?
I'll
I
take
distracted
the
myself.
blame.
No, I distracted because that's what happens when you get to my age. Okay, so let's talk about trauma. So what are the because a lot of people are probably struggling with trauma and they don't even know it. So what are the telltale signs of trauma? And I got some stuff here. Maybe we can stop and have a think about these. Okay, this is a big telltale sign, what I'm going to mention now, right? Irritability. Wow. And I was reading this thing the other day, like a lot of people in customer services are noticing increasing levels of irritability in shops and, even like in hospitals and things, like people just short-tempered. They might have had a short temper before the pandemic, but now it's even like shorter now. Yeah. And I often wonder, when people have a short fuse, when people are very irritable, I always think in my mind, there's probably something behind that.
It's a proxy war almost.
It's a proxy war, exactly. Yeah. It's not just the thing that they're angry at, but it's something, there's a story behind the story. But that's one of the telltale signs, irritability. I can get irritable sometimes, but I guess that's just getting older.
I think everyone can though, can't they?
Yeah, true.
Especially
although you're a very calm, placid kind of guy though, aren't you?
What makes you? My wife would say that.
I don't think that this is something that you've struggled with post-pandemic. That's not, okay, so all of us manifest trauma in different ways. I know that for me, it can be the case, because everything's changing so much, you can just feel out of control. I think it's the sense of being out of control.
Yeah.
That's probably, why there can be irritability sometimes as well. I think another big telltale sign of trauma is sleeplessness.
Sleeplessness, yeah.
I think a lot of people are struggling to get a decent night's sleep. And I'll say something more about that in a few minutes as well. But I think that's a huge symptom of trauma, like waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Worrying about life, yeah. Anxiety, massive anxiety. When you're, there's nothing worse than when your sleep gets disturbed.
It's the worst when you wake up and you're panicked and you don't know why you're panicked, or you're worried and you don't know why you're worried, and it doesn't make sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense. You're like, I need to sleep because otherwise I'm going to be tired, and then I'm going to be irritable.
So you're having a trauma about a trauma.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, 100%. And it's really, really challenging for people.
But I think that's a symptom of trauma, sleeplessness. Now, somebody might say, well, I had trauma before the pandemic because I wasn't sleeping then anyway. But it's probably, for a lot of people, I think this is a biggie, actually, sleeplessness. And there was the effects of not getting enough sleep alone, I think, are huge.
Massive.
You lose perspective on life when you're tired. Yep. I say my stupidest things when I'm tired.
Yep.
And actually, I think there's a link, strange enough, between irritability and sleeplessness. But they're all symptoms of like some kind of trauma. Defeatism is another one.
Wow. Like
the sense of like, and what is defeatism? It's losing your sense of optimism, losing your sparkle in life. I think that a lot of people are like that, and I get it. A lot of people have lost their sense of optimism. Like, I always think about students, who were like at university. And life was going well, and then I think about the freshers who were freshers back in 2020, yes. Just starting out in uni life. I mean, this is like your worst trauma of all.
Just getting to grips with
it. You just got free from mom and dad, right? You've been looking forward to this for years, right. Since you were 14, possibly 13, possibly even younger than that. Yeah. Right, the dream. You arrive in the land flowing with milk and honey, and what happens? A flipping pandemic means you're back living with mommy again. How bad is that?
It's pretty shocking.
I mean, that's a trauma in its own right. Okay, the food's good, but like family life can be pretty irritable sometimes as well.
Especially when you're locked down.
Especially when you're locked down.
Yeah.
You love the people that you love the most are often the people you say,
yeah, 100%.
Take it out on, don't you? But I think that all of that is like, I suppose these are all linked. You're not sleeping great. You're a bit irritable. The program changed. The plans you had in life. It's all out the window.
And keeps changing. Because you think Christmas, we had big plans to go see, both sides of my family and my wife's family, and then all of a sudden Boris is like, "No, you've got one day now." Do you know what I mean? And it's changing all the time.
Negativity is is a symptom of trauma. Here's a big one. Oh boy, relational breakdown is a big symptom of trauma.
It's a whole podcast episode in itself, isn't
it? This deserves a Toddcast of its own, doesn't it?
It does.
Relational breakdown. So, in other words, the trauma of the season just gets to you, and you're not sleeping well, you're irritable, you're full of anxiety, you've lost the sense of enjoyment of life. And then what happens when all of that stuff gets out of control is that it has an impact not only on the individual who's struggling with the trauma, but on like a lot of friends, not just marriages can struggle, but then friendships can struggle as well. I know a lot of people who've friendship groups have changed.
Yeah. Shifted
and it's like we've just got to be like real, and I know that there's a natural sense in which that can change over time as well, so I totally get that. But I think that what we want to be careful about is identifying when trauma and the effects of trauma is so out of control that we begin to lose friendships that we'll later regret losing.
100%. And look into things that aren't there, because that's what happens when you're tired, you've got some trauma going on, you start to magnify issues that aren't really issues.
Reading into everything that everybody says and thinking that there's some kind of hidden meaning, like a little conspiracy theory in your mind. Why did he say that? And why did she say this? And why
did that text come through after that program?
Absolutely. And why did he steal my boyfriend? And
I mean, that's fair.
That's a fair one.
Well, it's not fair to steal a boyfriend, but it's fair for.
But you've got to be like. You got to be careful. I think that the impact of trauma in this post-pandemic season doesn't get out of control to the extent that it like compromises friendships and relationships. And maybe that's it just needs a cup of coffee, in person, not on Zoom, but in person. More of a compassion, because everybody. Okay. People hate it when you say everybody's in the same boat, everybody's in the same ocean, but we all have different boats, all right, whatever. But we're all going through crap.
Yeah.
Can I say crap?
I think so.
It's a Toddcast, isn't it? This is the Toddcast. Honestly, this is a Toddcast. And let me tell you something. Crap is as bad as it's going to get on the Toddcast. I will have standards on this Toddcast.
Okay. I'm a bad sounding board then, if that's okay.
But it's like, we're all going through, this is tough. And so sometimes I think that, people can really, oh my word, they can compromise friendships, relationships, even marriages, And I think that we've just got to get some perspective on this.
That's right.
It is the toll of the season. We mustn't underestimate that. This has been huge. This has been the biggest deal that we've ever faced. I mean, I was reading about the Blitz in World War II, and the Blitz. Okay, so it was horrendous, of course, but it only lasted. I think it was 8 months or maybe 9 months of the entire war, because obviously the opposition realized, okay, this is not having the impact that we wanted it to have. So then life, even though the war was going on, and I don't want to undermine obviously what people went through, but there's a resilience with people, and then they got on with life, and there was no social distancing after that, and there was almost like a camaraderie, wasn't there? People would
a togetherness.
Family was together.
It brought the country together. I think
it brought the country together. The old Dunkirk spirit. People came together. People loved being together. But this is where the pandemic is different, because this in a way has torn us apart.
It has.
And even in a marriage context, for example, the loss of friendships, the loss of social groups, all of that stuff, because it's very important, I think, and very healthy for a married couple to have good friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
To go to little dinner parties. Because it's like a good way to, first of all, number one, enjoy a vol au vent. And boy, do I enjoy a vol au vent.
What is a vol au vent?
Have you never had a vol au vent? It's like a little pastry with, goodies in it. It can have all manner of meats and veg. No, meats.
No, meats.
Yeah. It's a Christian thing.
Okay.
And also, I don't know if anybody realizes, but Christians keep Schlor in business.
Schlor, Christian wine, come on.
You call it Schlor. I call it
Schlor.
I call it Schlor.
But it's a weird name, though, because you would never Schlor because it's not got alcohol in.
It's the Christian wine. Jesus turned the water into wine, and the church has been trying to change it back ever since.
I love that.
And they've been drinking Schlor in its place. And Christians, that company Schlur really ought to thank God for Christians.
I think it's
I've digressed. Christians, you go to your parties, you have a Volivant, you have a Schlur, but you connect and you laugh
that's
with
right.
people. But that was lost during the pandemic, and I think that has a huge impact on personal relationships as well. Okay, here's a big one. Here's a telltale sign of trauma, right?
Go on.
Questioning everything.
Wow. Okay.
And let's make this hit home, because obviously pastors and we're thinking theology and God and so on. And so I think what happens with a lot of people is that the post-traumatic trauma, the impact it has is they're even questioning God, questioning faith, questioning if God is so good, why does this happen? Why does that? And the challenge, the fundamental challenge with those questions, are they legit? Sure. But when people struggle with those questions, it probably emphasizes the lack of theological understanding that they have. God is good, and I believe that with all my heart, but the world is not good.
That's right.
God is good, but bad things happen.
Sure.
That we don't always have answers to. Even as a pastor, I don't have answers to most of the things that people come to me about, and that puts the pressure on, because people want you to have answers, and I don't have answers. I know one guy who's struggled tremendously with, not part of our church community. This is another friend of mine I know. And he's just struggled with not just the pandemic, but a whole bunch of other stuff that's happened in his life. And he's struggled to trust God through all of this. And but you see, I think that's real faith. Real faith is not getting what you want all the time.
That's right.
Faith is like trusting God when even life is falling apart, don't you think?
I think so, and that's what I appreciate. I think especially your teaching and the Junction Church, like what is taught at the Junction Church, is not this vending machine God, this name it and claim it nonsense. And I think
blab it and grab it. That's what I call it.
Confess it and profess it. Confess it and possess it. Whatever it is, rhyming all the time and all this. If it rhymes,
rhyming all the time and.
Rhyming all the time, and if it rhymes, it's anointed. No, that's what I appreciate about the reality of the teaching at the Junction Church. That actually life is not always good, but God is always good, and life's not always going to be good on this side of eternity. But actually, our hopes in Jesus, and it's so much bigger.
That's what we're trying to teach a generation. Yeah. So life can sometimes get tough, and but if you find yourself, and I know it can get so tough sometimes, and naturally there is a questioning: why does this happen, and why does that happen, and but there's a little verse that I try to live by, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. It's imploring us. Will you stop trying to understand this?
Yep.
Come on. You're not, number one, you're not that smart.
Yep.
And smart people recognize how not smart they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, smart. The way I said that there. Even the way I said that emphasizes how unsmart I am.
I'm not.
But confused. It's like, trust in the Lord with all your heart, not your head, your heart. It's a heart thing. Mm-hmm. In the end, your heart is the thing that says, no matter what, I trust you, God. I trust you. And, don't lean on your own understanding. Don't lean on your own understanding. Sometimes we can just try to be like working everything out in our own minds, and that's just not a good thing to do.
We can try to be God, essentially.
We can try to be God. That's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, getting back to your Genesis metaphor.
Yeah.
Hey?
There you go. There's your
bit of theology there, you see. But that could be a sign of trauma. I think post-pandemic trauma, the telltale signs, questioning everything. And, is there anything wrong with questioning stuff? No. But if the questioning of stuff is making you cold and distant and dragging you away from God, then what you got to do is question your questions.
Yeah, that's good.
So the questioning has got to go to the next level, where you got to question your questions. Yeah. And question your conclusions as well. Like, why would my conclusions be so right and God's word be so wrong? And that's a serious question.
It's a huge question.
I think so. I think the challenge is, though, our questions are born out of crisis and out of the emotion of the moment. And that's always a mistake, I think. You come out of something and you feel a certain way, and then you base your conclusion on how you're feeling in the moment. The problem is feelings come and go.
Feelings are fickle. Feelings are so fickle.
They are.
You have a bit of food and a good night's sleep, and you're feeling so different the next day, aren't you?
You have pizza, though, and it makes them worse because the cheese induces nightmares.
Is that a fact?
Did you know that?
I didn't know. I've now lost where I was.
That's a medical fact.
It's a medical fact.
I don't know where, but I just made that up.
But I think it's good though that you say question your questions, because I think actually, okay, so I don't have a lot of control over, and COVID's taught us that, I don't have a lot of control over the outside stuff.
Sure.
But I've got so much more, and I think we have so much more control than we realize over our minds, over our thoughts. You know, the Bible talks about taking every thought captive. Okay, so where's that question coming from? And actually, as you say, is it coming from a place of I want to get a conviction about this, or is it coming from crisis and I'm feeling really bad? And then where am I going with these questions? Am I just going into my own mind? I mean, that's a cesspool, isn't it?
It is.
Like, actually, as you say, I need to get to the word with this. And the Bible doesn't shy away from these
But see, for me, that's the danger of reclusivity.
Yes.
The biggest danger of reclusivity is believing your own narrative. Right? Believing your own thoughts. Oh, my word. That's like the worst of the worst.
You need to stop listening to yourself and start talking to yourself, I think, and start talking God's word to yourself, and getting into, as you say, community. And I think there's a study that shows you are 50% more likely to die prematurely if you're isolated and you don't have a good social structure. And that is not even including smoking, drinking, like all these things that, so you could be a smoker and you've got a more likely chance of living longer if you're in community. I'm not trying to encourage smoking, but what I'm trying to encourage is actually community.
Can I start smoking then?
So important. Pastor Roy, beer, yes, whatever you...
I've always fancied, like C.H. Spurgeon used to smoke a pipe, and I've always fancied like getting into pipes.
Exactly. And C.S. Lewis did.
Yeah.
Chesterton.
Yeah.
Many people.
Chesterton.
G.K. Chesterton.
G.K. Also...
Tolkien.
Yeah.
So next week you'll see us with pipes.
And there's a guy called John Piper as well.
John Piper.
But I don't think
does he smoke?
No, I don't think he
Probably
smokes.
not.
But he's got the name Piper, so that could be an indication as well. You know. See, told you it'd be bad jokes. Okay. So trauma. I mean, we just wanted to bring this up as like a subject. Okay, so let's move on. So as we're in this post-pandemic season, and I think the idea is COVID's not going to go away.
Yeah. It's a transition, isn't it, coming out of it? It's not just going to be...
Yeah.
It's a transition.
But it's not going to go away anywhere.
Yeah.
We're going to have to learn to live with it.
Yeah.
And hopefully, the vaccines, they're clearly having an impact.
Yeah.
And that's really, really encouraging. I'm double jabbed.
I'm double jabbed
without
too.
shame, and I'm encouraging people to get double jabbed. And, don't be a conspiracy theorist.
Amen.
I was laughing the other day. Somebody was telling me, don't get the jab because, you never know what's in it. And you know what they're drinking? Diet Coke.
It's nonsense.
They're drinking Diet Coke. And then they're telling me not to get a jab. And drinking Diet Coke!
Well, exactly. People have never...
Do you know what's in Diet Coke? You ever put 1 penny in a Diet Coke and see what happens? There's more harm in that Diet Coke than there is in that flipping... Jab. Anyway, I feel like I'm digressing. This is a Toddcast. I can do whatever I want.
Do what you want. This
is my cast because it's the
Toddcast.
Cast.
Amen.
Okay, so coming out of this, emerging from the past 18 months, post-pandemic season, if there's such a thing as the post-pandemic season. So how can you, here we go, cheesy quote, how can you not just survive, but how can you thrive? Because that's where we want to get as Christians. We don't just want to go for good. We want to go for great.
Yeah.
We want to go for the best. So how can you do that? And how can you best like deal with those trauma issues and channel the trauma of the season that has undoubtedly happened and turn it around and use it to our advantage? I've got some thoughts, and we'll just chat through some of these if we have time. The first thing is to look after your mental well-being.
It's good, Pastor. Very good.
There have been times, and I'm just being honest, in this past season when I've really struggled. I just felt overawed by the season, and like our church was doing so well before the pandemic hit. And then there was this little part of me that was thinking, this is just so big and so huge, and how are we going to build from here? And then, of course, I had to be resilient and learn, okay, so you got to just recognize that you're going to have to rebuild, and that you just have to accept that. But I think the impact on mental well-being in this season has been huge, partly because of the lack of interactions, and then even now that we can interact again, I find like social anxiety. I get that.
You know what? I get it. And I never would before. I mean,
you get social anxiety.
90. I mean,
but you're Fraser both. You don't get social anxiety.
So we're polar opposites in terms of introvert extrovert, right? So
I'm an introvert.
I'm 90% extrovert. I don't know what that 2% is doing, but I'm 90. And going back to like not so much one-on-one, but like going back to, for example, like to church and lots of people, and coming out of the service and people stood around social distancing afterwards, and then it's taking some getting used to again. Something that I would never, that actually that was the kind of thing that made me alive before COVID.
Sure.
Now is like. Feels quite overwhelming and very draining now
very
as well.
Tiring.
And I think it's...
but it's important. It's important to hold your nerve with it, because those friendships, those relationships, they are key.
Yeah.
And they will ultimately...
But they help me sleep better.
They help you sleep better, and they will do your mental health a world of good.
100%.
Because, again, I'm no expert on this, but for me, just to hang out with some people is just good. It's just a positive thing.
So important.
But look after your mental health. Rest well. Again, I'm, who am I? I'm no expert on this. But as a pastor, and this is just anecdotal, personal perspective, but I just wonder whether, and I know it's more complex than this, but I wonder whether there is a link between mental health challenges and a lack of sleep. Again, I know that this is not the case with everybody, because I know that there can be chemical imbalances and all kinds of stuff going on, and traumas in life and so on. But I just wonder whether there is some, very often a connection between, lack of sleep and mental health challenges, the loss of perspective caused by tiredness, and then your mind's just, because the mind needs rest as well.
It does.
And if you're up like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, what are you doing? You're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody was telling me the purpose of dreams. You ever wonder why you have like weird dreams where you're like, standing, giving out gospel tracts and you're naked?
It's just a normal Thursday for me, but
see, most people that's a nightmare. Whereas this is your normal.
This is just
weekend.
normal. This is just a day.
You're that guy, aren't you?
Day in the life. It's a joke, by the way.
Wow. But it's like you have weird dreams, about doing weird things in weird contexts. But that's what that's effectively doing, is your mind is kind of getting everything back into some kind of order again. It's putting this in the proper drawer and that in the proper drawer. So that's the reason, somebody was explaining to me, that's the reason for dreams.
That's right.
But I think for a lot of people, the sleeplessness, the anxiety then leads to tiredness, and your mind, like your body gets tired, your mind gets tired as well. And I'm convinced that if we can learn to rest well,
yes,
that could have a huge impact on our mental well-being as well. I think the other thing as well, there's a big danger, and I suppose the older you are, the more you can kind of have this, which is that, there can be part of you that can be longing for the return of the old normal. You know what I mean?
But it's never that good, though, is it?
It's never that good, but also it's not going to happen. The world's changed.
Yeah.
And there is a part of us, I think, that just has to accept things have changed.
Yeah.
The world is a completely different place compared to what it was before. So how do you survive and how do you thrive, and not just survive in this series? Okay, here's a big one, and I've talked about this for many years, and now we put it into practice. I think you got to increase your personal capacity.
It's good.
The pressure of the season is not going to go anywhere anytime soon. So what I'm learning to do in my life, and I don't always get this right, I'm learning to increase my capacity to handle the season. How do you increase your capacity? Well, first of all, you rest. You give your mind some space to rest. But then you've just got to how do you increase your capacity in your life? Give me some thoughts on that.
How do you increase your capacity? I think you have to process things as well, if that makes sense. So you can't just hide how you're feeling. It's not about, I guess the positive part of the Toddcast is not saying everything's great all the time.
Nope.
It's saying, actually, this is what I really struggle with, but God's still good. He's still in control. And actually, being able to process that, having, good people to process that with, who it doesn't become a rant session. You get it out, you process it, but then you can move on. That's going to increase your capacity, because otherwise you're going to be weighed down by those things, those thoughts, those feelings that are Yeah, I think that increases your capacity drastically, actually dealing with things.
So it's not about reducing the pressure, it's about increasing your capacity to handle the pressure. And again, when it comes to the post-pandemic season, that's what we've got to do. We've got to recognize, okay, so things have changed. So there's no point in me longing for the old normal. That's gone. The world has changed. So I've got to adapt to this new normal. I got to stay true to my convictions. I got to stay true to what I believe in, but I got to increase my capacity to grow through this season as well. I think the other thing as well is that in this season, here's my hunch. I think innovative people are going to do really well in this season.
Well, they have already.
Yeah.
I mean, you see, some businesses have not done great, but some businesses have thrived. They jumped on the delivery stuff. They jumped on. Okay, we're online. We're doing this, and this. And they're thriving. They're thriving. In fact, grown and
I tell you what I'm going to do. If ministry all goes wrong for me, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be an HGV driver.
Well, there you go. What is it, like £80,000 a year now?
It's going to go up soon as well because they're much in demand.
Wow.
That was a joke, by the way. Ministry is not going to go wrong.
But look at the Junction Church. The Junction Church was innovative thanks to your leadership. During the pandemic,
we did. It was trial and error, and I think that's the thing with innovation is that you've got to be willing to try things out and not take failure personally.
Yeah,
got to tell you, when the pandemic struck back in March 2020, like we did online and we made loads of mistakes. I think we got a fair bit of misunderstandings. We'd like pre-recorded, I think it was 7 or 8 services, and we'd done them so well, and then we broadcast them and live streamed them on a Sunday morning. And I was getting all these emails in saying, "What are you doing? You're not meant to be meeting. Church is not meant to be meeting, and you have all these people there, And then I would personally comment as I was preaching, of course, on the live stream because it was a pre-recorded preach. But I would comment, no, we're here, we're fine, we're not breaking the law. It was pre-recorded.
What's funny though is people never got back and said, "Oh, sorry about the mistake. This is wonderful what you guys are doing. Very interesting. Very quick to criticize."
Well, I think that was a little hint of the trauma that people were feeling. People were panicking and how we can't meet, so why are you meeting? It's born out of come on, let's call it it's born out of jealousy. It's born out of resentment. Why are you doing it when we can't do it? It's not fair. It's born out of insecurity. Why are you doing it so well when we're doing rubbish? Instead of and that's never a good way to live. Instead of just celebrating and if somebody is doing something wrong, anyway, it's none of your business.
Yeah.
Because let the law deal with that, and remember, you're not God. So chilleth out off, saith the Lord.
In the King James.
But I think innovation. Yeah, you get misunderstood. But here's the deal with innovation and being an innovative person. You got to be willing to try stuff and not take failure personally.
It's very good.
So we tried a lot of stuff back at the start of the pandemic with online church and with this and that other thing, and a lot of the stuff was just was good, well intended, but it just wasn't doing the business. But we had no qualms, and that was, in a way, that was the good thing about that season. You could try stuff and then just suddenly change it. Because that was the season, you could just do that, and I just think that we've got to have the will. Throw your pride away, take your ego out of the equation, do something that's worthwhile.
Yeah.
Do something that's going to make people's lives better. As Christians, we're going to say do something that's going to help people understand the love of God, how God's got a plan, and how they can fit their lives into that plan as well, and be innovative in how we do that. Maybe somebody's got a little business idea, and do you know what the problem with so many people is? That they're just waiting for everything to be so perfect.
Ah, wow.
I'll wait for it all to be perfect, and then some millionaire, will back me, and or somebody saying, "Oh, I'll marry a millionaire." Listen, they apparently, I'm not a millionaire, so I can tell, but apparently they're nightmares to live with.
Yeah,
because they're a lot of them don't have any integrity. And a lot
of
them,
just workaholics.
And they're workaholics, and they're married to their business rather than the person. So you want to really think, don't if you're thinking I'll marry a millionaire, no, don't do it. Just you become a millionaire. That's right. Let the millionaire marry you.
Yeah.
And then you can check them out to see whether they're the real deal or not. There's some free relationship advice, for somebody who needs that kind of advice. But be innovative and don't be afraid to fail. Failure is not the F word. Boom. Toddcast.
Another Toddcast
Theme.
Someone should be writing these down.
Failure.
I should be writing this
We
down.
should talk about this, actually. We should spend a whole Toddcast talking about failure. Why are we so afraid of failure? What is it? What's the deal?
Because we wrap what we do in our identity. I think that's the challenge. And what you do is not who you are. I think once you get that,
that's good.
That's the Toddcast. We'll go for that.
I'm telling you, this is the Botham Pod Blast.
No, I'm just
Pod Blast.
Pod Blast.
The Todd Blast.
Nah, I just done the podcast.
And I think that's the thing. Be innovative. Don't be afraid of failure. Positive people will always win in the end. I've had this thing in my life, and I'm full of contradictions, Fraser. I don't know if you know it or not. I'm just like a walking paradox.
Wow.
Because like part of me is melancholic. I find that music flows from melancholy. When I'm a little bit melancholic, I think time to get on the piano, and then I produce.
You're the most positive guy anyone's ever met.
But then that's the thing, though. But part of it is my theology, because my fundamental belief in theology is that God is good, and in the end, God's goodness will always shine through, even in the midst of madness.
Great, that's right. Yeah.
So I've always had this thing in my life that no matter how tough it is, it'll all be good. It's going to be good in the end.
Exactly.
Like the Junction Church back in the early days when we pioneered it. We had some tough old days, and when there was hardly anybody there.
Yeah.
But I always believed, and I always preached like, hundreds, even if there was only like 10 people. Remember the first Easter service we had, it was like 11 people showed up.
What I love is the passion's never changed. You and Pastor Lydia, stuff's changed, like how we do things and different stuff, but the culture.
It's about being positive. Again, I know that a lot of people think that's shallow, but actually in this post-pandemic season, you got to get yourself into a positive frame of mind. Okay, let's frame it in theological terms. You've got to have a conviction that God is good.
Well, positivity is the language of faith, isn't it?
It is
the language of faith.
It's helpful.
Yeah.
Faith will never flourish in a negative culture.
Yep.
And some people love to be negative, and they get they're negative about everything. They can't be positive about anything. And the thing is, if you don't learn to affirm and encourage, then ultimately you're going to build that kind of culture around your life, and then you wonder, why does nobody ever encourage me? Why am I so disconnected? Because you've never sown it.
Yeah, that's right.
So you got to sow it if you want to reap it.
That's right. And it makes you feel better as well, doesn't it? Even if you go out and encourage people, like it's quite selfish in a weird way. You'll feel great afterwards. You go and encourage 5 people. Do it, articulate it well. Don't just say you're a great guy. Why are they amazing? Why are they incredible? And you do that and you feel good afterwards. You're like, wow, okay, it's good.
So come on, people, you can do it. Be positive in this post-pandemic season. Yes, it's been challenging. Yes, it's been the most horrendous 18 months of our lives. But the possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
Possibilities for innovation, possibilities for kingdom innovation.
Yep.
Like we just had a baptism last night, and we innovated. We did it in a chat show format.
It was brilliant.
And, had a bit of worship. Of course, religious people say, where was the preach? Well, didn't need to preach.
They told us the testimonies.
The people told their stories, and the stories were more than enough. And people were massively impacted. But they don't want a 3-hour preach.
Well, that is the preach, proclaiming the good news that's happening in people's lives.
I hear these churches, okay, this is meant to be positive, but I'm going to go negative, and they'll get back to
being positive. It's quirky.
This is quirky. But it's it makes me laugh. Like the churches say, we need verse by verse exposition every week. But they're the fattest, meanest, most graceless churches you ever come across in your life. Paradox. They know more about the Bible than everybody else, and yet they read the Bible, but the Bible hasn't read them.
That's right. Faith without works.
You know the greatest translation of the Bible is, by the way?
The Northern Irish?
No,
NIV.
the one that comes out through your life.
Oh!
And the NIV, the North of Ireland version.
I thought you were going for a joke. I didn't realise you were going for... Wow.
No, I was going for deep revelatory
That
moment.
was deep.
You were messing around.
Yeah.
Honestly, the anointing was just about to fall. Revival was about to hit the nation, and you just did.
Isn't that
NIV.
Isn't that a relationship?
So, come on. This is a season of opportunity, and you can do this. And listen, we're going to be back next week. I've got some more great stuff to tell you about. And we've got a whole bunch of themes that we're going to talk about.
We've got some great themes.
Next week, we're going to talk about who's the daddy?
Who is the daddy?
We're going to talk about how
the graphics team genuinely thought this was a joke. They thought I was joking. I had to send screenshots, seeing you message me we're doing this for them to believe that these
So
are real.
we're going to talk about the trauma of fatherhood next week, and the trauma, the joy of fatherhood.
Joy.
And I want to find out how fatherhood's changed you, and I'm going to tell you how fatherhood's changed me. And
Brilliant.
then we're going to get into a little bit of a conversation about what's that verse? You've got many instructors, but few fathers, and we're going to talk about that. What did Paul mean when he said that? But that's for the next Toddcast.
And maybe we'll open up some dad jokes if you're lucky.
We'll have some dad jokes going on.
Just some good feedback.
So listen, thanks for joining us today. I hope that's been some kind of an encouragement to you. So post-pandemic trauma, how do we wrap this thing up? Well, identify the telltale signs, and I just mentioned a few, but I'm sure that there's a whole bunch of things that you could identify because you're smart. You can identify it yourself. Identify it. Get some kind of perspective on the season. It's a season of huge change, so cut yourself a bit of slack.
That's good. That's very good.
Come on, stop being so hard on yourself. This has been a huge season of change, and then don't be afraid of failure. Innovate. Try stuff. Try things that you've never tried before. Some of them will work, but not all of them are guaranteed to work, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Stay connected to God's house. Get around good encouragers because they'll do you the world of good for your mental well-being and for your spiritual well-being as well. And it's going to be great. So, from Roy Todd, from Fraser Botham, have you enjoyed the first ever Toddcast?
Loved the first ever Toddcast. Hope you guys have. And don't forget to like the video if you have liked it. Leave us a comment. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. I've always wanted to say that. Subscribe.
But it's not just on the YouTube channel because it's on the Spotify.
It's on Spotify. It's on wherever you get your podcast. So whether you're listening to this as well, leave us some feedback.
I prefer to listen because I got a perfect face for radio. Tell you, it's perfect for it.
Heard that before.
Honestly, it's just great. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Bye.